Hello. I apologize in advance, I don't speak Spanish. So I'm going to do this in English. So as I'm going through this, I want to make this an interactive discussion. It's always fun to come down to Latin America. And it's a beautiful country, so thank you for hosting me. So just by way of background, I've spent a lot of time in the cloud. The cloud's probably the most overused word in the industry besides big data and mobile. But nonetheless, we've seen a lot of advancements in the cloud. I actually started a company back in 2007. Any startups in the room? Got a couple. So I actually started a company and I'm actually from California in Silicon Valley. Started a company in the cloud that competed against Amazon. Anyone using Amazon today? A few of you. So started a cloud storage company, and I'd like to say when I raised $18 million for the company, they told me my head was in the clouds. And the reason for that was kind of crazy to think you were going to put all these services in this multi-tenant, what was perceived at the time, insecure cloud environment. A lot has changed since 2007. I went to VMware and worked on ESX and worked on vCloud and a lot of things that we're doing inside of VMware. And then came to HP. And one of the key things that, again, I'm going to talk to you about today is what we see from a cloud environment and the trends that are occurring. And there's two things that I want to make sure that I get across today that we see in the cloud. Number one is open. Open standards are driving the cloud as we move forward. And number two is hybrid. And with that, there's a lot of dynamics occurring inside of the enterprise today, between the enterprise and the service providers, right? You have open versus proprietary stacks. Anyone heard of OpenStack? Right? I know we're going to have a few people come into the room for a moment. I got a couple people. So you have the emerging trends around driving to open and what's called hybrid cloud computing. Hybrid cloud computing is simply, can I use private clouds inside the firewall as well as hosted clouds which are outside of the firewall, or what's called a public cloud. So you have these driving what's going on in the cloud. You also have security concerns. Right? One of the biggest hurdles we hear about cloud computing is it's not secure. Well, actually, I would tell you that's a fallacy. It's a false statement. And in fact, it could be more secure putting data into the cloud than not. Again, I always like to give credit where credit's due. What's happening in the cloud industry is a lot of companies are hiring the best security experts in the world. And they, in turn, are driving significant security around cloud computing. Right? So again, you have these significant dynamics occurring, but the key thing that's also rapidly occurring is that cloud adoption, it's real and it's happening today. And one of the key things I always talk about is you need, as a customer, it's cloud or die. And the reason why do you want to use cloud? Any guess? Why do you want to use cloud? Exactly. It's about speed. It's about agility. It's about getting the latest Apple iPhone app into the marketplace. It's about getting the latest marketing application into the marketplace so you can grow your customer base. You no longer have that opportunity to wait for IT to actually set up a computer or a server, provision that server. What used to take 6 months, it has to happen instantaneously. And as a result, what we're seeing happening in the industry is a rapid adoption by enterprises of cloud computing. The first phase of cloud computing was all about public cloud. And everybody believed that you would put all the data out on a public cloud and all your compute resources on a public cloud. That's simply not the case. Those were the early adopters. We're now moving into the next phase. Right? Private cloud computing is actually significantly outpacing or growing faster than public cloud. And the reason for that, we're seeing benefits of cloud computing from a speed and agility standpoint inside the firewall. But ultimately, where does the enterprise want to go? Where do businesses want to go? And just as important, where do service providers want to go? They want to go to hybrid cloud computing. Do we have any retailers in the room? that offer goods and services, one of the key things that retailers have always done in the past is I build to peak capacity, meaning I buy 100% or maybe 110% of what I expect to happen at Christmas or holiday time. You don't have to do that if you use hybrid cloud computing. I can build 80% of my resources internally and then take advantage of public cloud computing to what's called bursting. So significant growth inside of what's occurring inside the enterprise. But there has been a major struggle. When everyone started hearing about cloud, again, there was association with public cloud. It's got to be public cloud. It's low cost, it's inexpensive. Right, we're going to host all that data off-site. But that's not exactly what the enterprises were doing. And in fact, on the internal IT side, IT was saying no. IT was saying, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do that. And in fact, what I would say is IT isn't necessarily the right in doing that. In fact, IT needs to embrace cloud computing and take advantage of all the goodness that they can help their business, their line of businesses drive for their customers. So we've seen this significant battle between public cloud and private cloud, or IT and the business. Guess what? They're both right. And in fact, when we advance to today, 2014, where do we sit? There's really a lot of, sorry, always great using slides here. There's really key things that are driving cloud computing right now. Number one, as I mentioned at the outset, is hybrid cloud computing. And what does that mean again? It's going to be an and world. I'm going to use private cloud, again, which is inside the firewall, and public cloud. It's really going to be based off your service level agreement for your application. The other thing we're absolutely seeing today is a movement towards open standards. Does everyone remember 10, 15 years ago when you ran Oracle on top of Unix? Today, do you run anything but Oracle on top of Linux? As what happened in the operating system with open source and open standards, we're seeing that same thing from a cloud computing standpoint. In fact, I, as a betting man, I go to Las Vegas. If anyone's ever been to Las Vegas, I will make some bold statements that OpenStack is the emerging open cloud platform, will be the data center operating system of choice from a cloud computing standpoint within 5 years. That's how rapid the adoption is that we're seeing. A few other things that we're seeing from a cloud computing standpoint that are very important. Security does matter. But security needs to be looked at in the context of your data, data privacy, and your compliance officers. So this means it may be public-facing content. That could fit very well in a public cloud computing context. Or it may be that I have highly regulated, I'm a banking industry, high privacy, I'm in Colombia, my data must live here. Then you need to do that in a private cloud. So other things, again, we're seeing around this emergence of a secure cloud network and the ability to take advantage of open and hybrid environments. Right, the other key thing that we're seeing here is that applications themselves are driving the choice of where you drive what choice you use from a cloud computing environment. Again, if I'm a marketing company, I used to run marketing in some of the companies in the past. Very much these guys are going out to Amazon right now. Why? Because I can rapidly get an application into the marketplace. It doesn't have sensitive data. It can scale out rapidly. I launch an iPhone app, and I can move from maybe 1,000 users to 1 million users overnight. How can I accommodate that as a business? Right? Public cloud computing is great for that. But now I have a banking application, highly regulated, high privacy. That in turn may dictate it runs in a private cloud. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about the applications. They're what matters. And that in turn dictates where you drive your application choice from a cloud standpoint. And the final thing that we're seeing is this emergence of what we call an enterprise service provider. The other term you'll hear is called cloud broker. And what do I mean by that? That's really the ability to use private, virtual private, and public cloud services simultaneously based off the application. And in turn, you go from IT being the blocker of cloud computing to IT becoming the embracer of cloud computing, to becoming the service provider internal to the business. So let's go through this in a little bit more detail and what we see, again, around hybrid cloud computing. So this was a recent Gartner study that asked many enterprises out there, what do you expect to do in the cloud? Are you going to use public? Are you going to use private? Are you going to use what's called virtual private cloud, which is nothing more than instead of being inside your firewall dedicated to you, it's outside your firewall dedicated to you? What are you going to use? And the overwhelming answer that's coming back is and. I'm going to use all the above. I'm going to use private and public. And that's very much front and center what we're seeing in cloud computing. The second key thing that we are seeing, and this is, I would tell you, probably near and dear to my heart, is that open standards will drive cloud computing. 3 years ago, actually going on 4 years ago, at HP, we had a very difficult choice. What do we build our cloud platform on? We had the choice to use VMware on the vCloud side. We had some internal HP lab technology. But we also saw this very strong emerging growth around what was called OpenStack. And we bet on OpenStack 4 years ago. And let me talk about this a little further detail. Today, if you look at what drives the web, open source drives the web. Whether that be from an operating system with Linux, whether it's from the development platform, whether it's from the web server in Apache. Again, open standards and open source are driving the web infrastructure. That same thing we absolutely expect, and we're seeing this today with some of the largest banks in the US adopting open cloud environments. Retailers, healthcare, some highly regulated environments are adopting open standards-based clouds. Why? It provides them the best innovation. It provides them the ability, any Eagles fans out there? You know Eagles, the group? Hotel California? Yes? All right. The reason why enterprises are looking at open standards and the open cloud platforms is you do not want a Hotel California problem. You do not want the situation where I check into the hotel and I can never get out. This is very, very important. With open standards and open cloud computing platforms, you have the opportunity to make sure that if your service provider is not delivering on their standards, you have the opportunity to move. Again, as I mentioned, I was at VMware before. And one of the key things that we did back then is we introduced memory-based pricing. Any VMware customers? There's got to be a few out there, right? Dominant standard in virtualization. Memory-based pricing really sent shockwaves in the industry because it really highlighted how expensive it was to be in that platform. It is really what I characterize as the prototypical Hotel California problem. If I go down a proprietary stack, it's very difficult for me to get out. And as I mentioned, I talked about OpenStack. OpenStack is the emerging open cloud platform environment. When we first embraced OpenStack at HP, again about three and a half years ago, we built the world's first public cloud on OpenStack. And it was very, very hard. A lot of immaturity gaps. Let's fast forward to today. When we first started the OpenStack consortium alongside Rackspace, NASA, and a couple others, at the very first conference, we had 500 people. The last one we just did in May in Atlanta had 4,500 companies. We are further ahead today with OpenStack than where Linux was at the exact same time in its maturity schedule. There's over 100,000 developers worldwide checking in code. So it just gives you a sense of the community, the ecosystem, and the growth around OpenStack and open standards. And if I leave you with nothing else today, and I'll repeat this a little bit later, open and hybrid are the two key things you have to focus on from a company perspective. Again, you do not want a Hotel California problem. So as I highlighted, the other key thing that is very, very important, particularly from a service providers, we have many service providers here at the show. It's important not only for you as a customer or a business to embrace open networks or open cloud platforms, but it's also important for service providers to begin driving down this pathway. Two reasons for this. Number one, service providers have to make money as well. And the best way for them to make money is to have control of their destiny, control of the innovation. Open source, and again, OpenStack in this case, provides that capability for them. The other key advantage for OpenStack or for service providers is that I want to provide that same open choice, that hybrid model. So if I implement as a customer an OpenStack environment internal to my firewall for cloud computing, I want to be able to take advantage of bursting or reach right out into a service provider that's also part of an open network. So one of the other key things that we have sponsored as a consortium at HP is what's called the Helium Network. And this is a global open network, an open secure network that we're building worldwide with many of the leading service providers on the planet, with the goal to provide an open secure environment that has choice, the best cloud services available to you. And again, it's consistency of architecture, so you can use OpenStack internally as well as OpenStack externally. So we've had companies join as part of this consortium, the likes of AT&T in the United States, Telefonica, Portugal Telecom, British Telecom, NTT Telecom, which is down in Japan, and then down in Latin America, which we see huge growth around cloud services. Right? We've had Alestra and our friends at Synopsys. Right? We expect others to continue to join within the network to provide you as a customer the best choice. And why is this important? It's going to give you the best cost and the greatest flexibility, and it will be secure for your environment. So as I said, the other key thing that's very, very important is you have to look at your applications. What applications belong where? Does my application even belong in the cloud? I can tell you many applications do not. In fact, they should just be left in a traditional environment. But there's also absolutely applications that should be moved in the cloud. You have to do a thorough analysis of those applications. Right? You want to look at it from two dimensions. Number one, what's called scale up. These are your traditional high availability applications built on Oracle, SAP, highly virtualized environments inside of VMware. Right? We see very strong continued growth in there, about 50% growth year over year. But there's also the new scaled out applications. And these are those marketing applications I talked about earlier, the iPhone app that moves from 1,000 users one day to 1 million users tomorrow. That needs to be able to scale out rapidly. And instead of doing high availability in the hardware, you do high availability in the software. You just scale new instances of that software very, very rapidly. And as you can see from this slide, the growth in those new scaled out applications is very, very significant. So it's important that you look at those applications, determine which applications belong where, and it may even require for you to rewrite some of those applications. But it needs to be really begin here. There's another statement I always like to use. It's about the application. Right? It's not about the hardware. It's not about the software. It's not about anything else. It's about the application you need to drive your business. Make sure and take a look at that. So as I've gone through, again, open and hybrid, this movement towards a secure cloud network, the importance of identifying the applications and what belongs where. The thing that we're seeing is really kind of almost the emergence of these two worlds, these two camps of battling between IT and business. Business wants to move very, very fast. Speed, agility are very important. You'll notice I didn't say cost is the number one driver there. On the IT side, it's about security, right? It's about control. The thing that has to happen and what we are starting to see happen is these two worlds collide and come together and become much more collaborative. Whereas IT before was the no, they're now becoming yes. The reason why they're becoming yes is they have to. If IT does not reinvent itself and adopt cloud computing, they will be left behind. The business has multiple choices now. I can go to Amazon. I can go to a local service provider that's offering cloud computing. Guess what? I can get that server in a matter of minutes. And you as IT, if you're not really driving those same type of principles internally, you will be left behind. So as a result, we're absolutely seeing this emergence or drive towards what we call this enterprise service provider model. And the enterprise service provider model is simply that I, as an IT business within the enterprise or within the customer, no longer have to do everything myself. But instead, I need to be able to broker services. And what do I mean by that? I need to be a partner with business that says, listen, these are your choices. Let's define those choices in a marketplace, or what's called the services catalog. And based off the service level agreement and other considerations around security, privacy issues, compliance, we will in turn build that marketplace that represents not only internal IT assets from a cloud computing standpoint, but also external assets like Amazon Public Cloud, like HP Public Cloud, like the Helium network that I talked about. The key thing, and this is very important from an enterprise or business perspective, it's moving from being that hard-coded, I must put a server in, I must put storage, networking, right, and then wait, and then have the business wait, to now becoming the service provider to those businesses and leveraging cloud computing not just from a private standpoint but from a public standpoint, right? So, you know, I've talked a little bit about what we are seeing in the marketplace and what we're seeing from an enterprise context. The key thing, again, that I want to leave you with, keep going. The key thing I want to leave you with, 2 words. Cloud computing is moving to an open model, and cloud computing is moving to a hybrid model. What you want to look at, whether you're a service provider or an enterprise, is how do I embrace that world, drive that world forward? What are the applications I have to be able to put into that open hybrid environment? And how can I, as service provider inside that enterprise, drive the speed and the agility that the business is looking for? As I also said, and I fervently believe this, I've lived the cloud since 2007, so I'm an aged veteran and I've got a lot of scars on my back of what not to do. It is today about cloud or die. Whether you're a storage administrator, it's about cloud or die for you. You need to be a storage service administrator. That means you offer storage services internally as well as externally. The same thing from a networking standpoint, compute standpoint, right? It's very important that we go through this reinvention to drive business forward. The other thing I would say, this is a lot of fun, and we're having the best time. I've never had this much fun in my life. Went through the dot-com phase and now the cloud computing phase. It's real, it's happening today, and it's happening fast. I did not show a slide here, but where is Juan? And Juan runs Latin America for me right here. But we're seeing about, what, $600 million in spend, I think this year alone, in Latin America. Large growth is occurring.